It started as such a simple idea. After days of noticing the fraying towels in our bathroom, the same ones we'd had for years, I decided it was time for an upgrade. Just a small surprise, nothing flashy, but something to bring a bit of warmth and freshness into our home. The thought of her smile when she'd noticed the soft, colorful replacements made me feel like I was doing something right. Maybe things had been a little stale between us lately, but I told myself that small gestures mattered. They built up to something bigger. I ducked out during lunch, heading to the little home store just a few blocks from my office. I wandered through aisles stacked high with towels in every imaginable color and texture. Finally, I landed on a mix of soft blues and greens, the kinds of shades that reminded me of calm beach mornings, ones we'd spent together, laughing and carefree. I bought a matching set, full of that renewed excitement that small acts of kindness bring. I imagined her noticing them after a long day, her lips breaking into a smile, maybe throwing her arms around me in gratitude. It felt good to think about, like we might recapture some of what we'd been missing lately. And by the time I reached our front door, juggling the package of towels, I couldn't wait to set it all up and surprise her. I unlocked the door, quietly slipping inside, and froze when I heard voices. Hers, and someone else's. It was low at first, like a murmur. Maybe she was on the phone, I thought. But as I moved closer, setting the towels down gently on the floor, I recognized that other voice. It was Michael, her coworker. He'd joined us for drinks with her office crowd once or twice, enough for his face and voice to stick in my memory. Something was wrong. I didn't even feel myself move. My feet seemed to carry me forward before my brain could tell them to stop. I stepped lightly down the hall, drawn by the voices that drifted out from the half-open bedroom door. I was close enough to hear their laughter, intimate, unguarded, the kind of laughter you save for private moments. My stomach clenched as reality settled in, heavy and cold. I knew what I'd find on the other side of the door. I pushed it open fully, and there they were. Michael was leaning into her, his hands wrapped around her waist as they laughed about something too personal for me to understand. They hadn't noticed me yet. It was as if I was some ghost, an invisible observer to this scene that shattered the illusion of our life together. Finally, she looked up, her face transforming in a flash from amusement to shock. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and terrified, as if I was the intruder here. "Matt," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. I could barely manage to choke out the words. "How long?" Michael shifted awkwardly, releasing her and stepping back, looking anywhere but at me. But she just stared at me, her face draining of color, as if waiting for some magical explanation to materialize. She took a shaky step forward, her mouth working as she stammered, it doesn't mean anything. "I swear, Matt." It was just, her voice trailed off, and she looked down, the guilt clear in her eyes. "Doesn't mean anything." I repeated, my voice low, even, almost calm. "So, you're telling me it just happened? Out of the blue, no feelings involved. Is that what you're saying, Sarah?" "Yes, no, I mean, yes." "It was a mistake," she insisted, her voice rising as she tried to close the gap between us. I was lonely. You haven't been here. You've been so distant." Her words faltered as she realized how hollow her reasoning sounded. My jaw tightened. "And that's how you handle things? By bringing someone else into our bed?" Michael, still avoiding eye contact, finally muttered, "Maybe I should go." He tried to edge past me, but I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You're not going anywhere," I said sharply, my voice like ice. "You were a guest in my home. Sat at my table. And now you're here." I paused, struggling to keep my composure. "Explain to me how you thought this was okay." He glanced between Sarah and me, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. "Look, Matt, I don't know what to say. Things happen. You've been busy, and Sarah, he trailed off, letting the sentence hang in the air like an accusation. I laughed, a cold, humorless sound that felt foreign in my own mouth. "So, this is on me. I wasn't there enough, and you thought that made it okay to betray me?" No, that's not what I meant." Sarah's voice cracked, desperation seeping into her tone as she reached out, almost touching my arm, but I pulled back, stepping out of her reach. I shook my head, unable to look at either of them. You don't get to rewrite this, Sarah. You don't get to turn this around on me. I thought we were better than this, that we could talk about things. I turned to Michael, meeting his gaze at last. I trusted you, too. He looked down, his face twisted with guilt, but he didn't say a word. I straightened, my voice steadier than I felt. Both of you. Out. I don't want to see either of you again. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears as she realized I wasn't bluffing. Matt, please, she whispered, desperation thick in her voice. Don't do this. We can talk about it, we can fix this. I let out a sigh, feeling like I was watching myself from the outside, numb and hollow. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. Just go. She hesitated, then slowly nodded, her eyes brimming with a sadness that I couldn't bring myself to feel. Michael muttered a quiet, "I'm sorry," as he slipped past me, his head down. I didn't acknowledge him. Once they were gone, the silence felt suffocating. I looked around, at the room I thought had been ours, a shared sanctuary, now tainted by their betrayal. My gaze fell on the towels still in the hallway, where I'd dropped them in shock. I picked them up, one by one, and tossed them onto the bathroom counter. All the small things that once felt special now felt pointless. The days after that moment were a fog, filled with shattered routines and a heaviness that sat at the edge of every thought. I stayed away as much as I could, finding reasons to stay late at work or to sleep at a friend's place. But the anger simmered beneath the surface, relentless, refusing to let me settle. So I knew I'd have to go back. I needed answers, closure, maybe just something I could throw back at her to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused. When I finally walked back into our apartment, Sarah was waiting for me, sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. She'd obviously been anticipating this moment, the tension clear in her rigid posture. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and tired, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. I didn't give her the chance. "Explain it to me," I said, my voice harsher than I intended. "Make me understand how you thought any of this was okay." She flinched, drawing her hands into her lap, her shoulders slumping as she looked down. "Matt, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you. It was a mistake, a mistake." I repeated, incredulous, my jaw clenching as I tried to keep my anger in check. "That's your excuse. A mistake. You brought him into our bed, Sarah. I walked in on you like some kind of joke, and all you can say is that it was a mistake." Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head, reaching out toward me. "It was more complicated than that. I was lonely. You were gone so much, always busy with work. I felt forgotten." I pulled back, the excuse hitting like salt in a wound. "Forgotten? That's how you're going to spin this? I was working to keep us stable, to give us a future. I wasn't out there lying or running off with someone else whenever I felt lonely." I felt my voice rising, filling the room with the fury I'd kept bottled up. "Matt, please," she started, her tone desperate. "You've been so distant, so closed off. I thought maybe Michael would help me feel something again." I stared at her, incredulous. "So you felt entitled to cheat? Because things were dull? Sarah, people talk. They communicate. They work through things together. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Not sneaking around, not inviting some coworker into our life like I'd never notice." She looked down again, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know I messed up," she choked out. "I know. But please, let's not throw everything away because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I couldn't help the laugh that escaped, bitter and sharp. "You don't get it, do you? You destroyed any chance of me trusting you. How am I supposed to look at you, look at us, and just pretend that everything's fine?" She sniffed, her face a mask of desperation and regret. "I love you, Matt. I do. I know I messed up, but I love you. Can't we at least try to fix this? I shook my head, unable to even look at her. Love? You don't do this to someone you love, Sarah. You don't make them feel like a stranger in their own life. You don't betray them in their own home. You chose yourself, again and again, over us. She took a shuddering breath, a new wave of tears filling her eyes. But I'm here now, Matt. I'm here, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Just, give me a chance. I could feel the weight of her words, the desperation clawing through her every syllable, but I couldn't find it in me to care. That part of me, the one that would have tried, that would have believed her, was gone, destroyed the moment I saw them together. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. No, Sarah. I can't do this anymore. Her face fell, her shoulders shaking as she tried to stifle a sob. Please, Matt. I'll go to counseling. We can work on this. I'll do anything. Just, don't end it like this. I looked away, every inch of me fighting the pull of her pleading gaze. The part of me that still loved her was buried under layers of betrayal and pain, and there was no bringing it back. I forced myself to speak, my voice steady and unyielding. I want a divorce. Her breath hitched, her hand flying to her mouth as she choked back a sob. No, no, Matt, please. We don't have to do this. We've been through so much. I know I hurt you, but we can get through this. I swear we can. I held her gaze, my eyes meeting hers with a finality that I knew would cut her more than anything else I could say. You killed us the moment you let him in, Sarah. There's nothing left to fight for. She stared at me, silent, the words settling over her like a weight too heavy to lift. After a long pause, she whispered, You mean that? Yes, I replied firmly, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness at the honesty of it. I mean it. For a moment, I thought she might argue again, but instead, she just nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging as the reality sank in. Fine, she murmured, her voice hollow, defeated. If that's what you want, then, I won't fight it. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of finality settle over me. Goodbye, Sarah. She looked up, her face still wet with tears, but there was a glimmer of acceptance in her eyes. Goodbye, Matt, she said softly, barely louder than a breath. Without another word, I turned and left, the echo of her sobs following me out the door as I stepped into the night. I didn't look back. I knew that if I did, I might waver, might remember the love we'd once shared, might find myself caught in her pleas. But I didn't. The life we'd built together, the trust we'd shared, was over. I wasn't leaving that night to hurt her. I was leaving because it was the only way I could start to heal. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and emotions I had never expected to feel, sadness, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. After that night, I had thrown myself into the divorce process with a determination that surprised even me. I knew it was time to reclaim my life and put the pieces back together, no matter how scattered they were. I remember sitting at my desk at work, staring at the computer screen, but my mind was elsewhere, running through every detail of the life I thought I'd had. I could hear my colleagues chatting in the background, but their voices faded into a dull hum as I pulled out my phone to check the time. My stomach twisted at the thought of my upcoming meeting with my lawyer, Lisa. As I walked into the small conference room, I found her sitting at the table, her expression serious yet sympathetic. Lisa was in her late 40s, a seasoned professional who had helped countless clients through their own divorces. She looked up and smiled slightly, but I could see the concern behind her eyes. Matt, she said, gesturing for me to sit. How have you been holding up? I shrugged, feeling the weight of my emotions. I don't know, honestly. Some days are better than others. But I'm ready to move forward. Good to hear, she replied, her tone steady. I've started drafting the initial papers. We can file for an uncontested divorce since Sarah seems to understand the gravity of the situation. But I need to know how you want to handle the finances and any joint assets. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. I just want to cut ties. I don't care about the apartment or the furniture. I want it all behind me as quickly as possible. Understandable, Lisa said, jotting down notes. I'll ensure that we get everything squared away in your favor, especially considering the circumstances of the separation. It might be wise to consider a settlement for any future spousal support too. Spousal support? I scoffed. She doesn't deserve a dime from me. She made her choices. Lisa nodded, her expression serious. Just keep in mind that sometimes, it's easier to settle than to fight it out in court. It could help avoid further emotional strain. Sure, I said, dismissing the thought. Let's just get it done. After our meeting, I walked out of the office feeling lighter, like I'd taken the first real step toward my freedom. But as the days turned into weeks, Sarah's attempts to reach me became more frantic. She called, texted, and even emailed me, her words weaving a desperate narrative of remorse and regret. I read them, but they only fueled my resolve to press on with the divorce. One evening, while I was sorting through paperwork at home, I received a call from her. I hesitated, letting it ring before I finally answered. Matt, her voice came through, shaky and frail. Can we talk? About what? I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the familiar twinge of anger crept in. About us, she said, her words rushed. I want to meet. I need to explain some things. I thought you should know. Know what, Sarah? That you're still trying to manipulate me? I cut in, my patience thinning. I'm not interested in any excuses. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Matt, please. Just give me a chance to explain. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe we can salvage this. I felt my stomach twist, but I forced myself to respond. There's nothing left to salvage, Sarah. You tore it apart the moment you let him in. I don't want to talk about it. I want to move on. Move on? She exclaimed, her voice rising with frustration. What if I told you that I realize I made a huge mistake and that I want to fix things? I want to go to counseling or anything that could help. I sighed, my frustration boiling over. You think counseling will fix this? Do you think I can just forget what you did? It doesn't work like that. I can't trust you anymore. Matt, please. Goodbye, Sarah, I said, cutting her off. I hung up before I could second-guess myself, feeling the weight of finality settle in my chest. The next few days were consumed by meetings with Lisa as we prepared to file the divorce papers. I remember sitting in her office, the scent of fresh coffee lingering in the air as she explained the next steps. Once we file, you may want to brace yourself for her reaction, Lisa advised, her tone serious. She might not take it well. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I don't care. I just want to be done with her. Lisa nodded but looked at me carefully. It's important to stay focused on your goals. Don't let her manipulate the situation. You need to think about your future, not just the past. Believe me, I'm thinking about it, I replied, my voice firm. I'm done being her pawn. As we finalized the paperwork, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Once the papers were signed, there would be no turning back. I wouldn't have to look at her face or hear her voice. No more reminders of the life we'd built, just a blank slate ahead of me. When the day finally came to file, I walked into the courthouse with Lisa by my side, each step echoing the weight of the decision I had made. The building loomed over me, cold and unwelcoming, but I steeled myself. I was ready to let go. Once inside, we approached the clerk's desk. I handed over the forms, feeling the finality of the moment wash over me. The clerk looked up and began processing the paperwork, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Is this your first time filing for divorce? She asked without looking up. Yes, I replied, my throat dry. It's tough, she said, finally meeting my gaze. But it sounds like you're making the right decision for yourself. Just remember to take care of yourself through all of this. Thank you, I murmured, feeling a rush of gratitude for her unexpected kindness. After what felt like an eternity, the clerk handed me a stamped copy of the filed paperwork. I held it tightly, a small piece of reassurance that I was finally taking control of my life. It's done, I said, more to myself than anyone else. Lisa smiled at me, a small glimmer of pride in her eyes. "You did it, Matt. This is the first step toward your new beginning." As we walked out of the courthouse, the weight of my decision settled in. I could finally breathe again, the air feeling lighter, a hint of freedom just within reach. But as I stepped onto the street, I felt a shiver run down my spine, a flicker of unease creeping back in. Sarah wouldn't let this go easily. I knew that she would fight, and I braced myself for the fallout that was sure to follow. The weeks following the filing of my divorce were a roller coaster of emotions. I had been preparing myself for the battle that lay ahead, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover. Each day felt like a small victory as I distanced myself from Sarah and the life we had built, yet there was a constant gnawing anxiety in the back of my mind. I spent most of my time at work, pouring myself into projects and avoiding social events. My colleagues had been supportive, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like they were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was during one of those long days that I received a call from Lisa. "Matt, I need to meet with you. There's something important we need to discuss," she said, her tone urgent. I sat up straight in my chair, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "What's going on? Can you come to my office? It's better we discuss this in person." "Okay," I replied, my heart racing. I could only imagine what news could warrant such urgency. When I arrived at Lisa's office, she was already waiting for me, her face a mask of concern. "Thanks for coming so quickly. I've received some information that I think you need to know about." I felt the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. "After filing, I got a call from a colleague in the district attorney's office," she began, her expression serious. "They've been investigating some discrepancies at the company where Sarah works, and it seems she's been implicated in a larger scheme." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? Discrepancies? What kind of scheme?" "Embezzlement," Lisa said bluntly, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "Sarah and Michael were allegedly involved in siphoning funds from the company. It's still under investigation, but her name has come up multiple times." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the blood rush from my face, the implications of what she was saying swirling in my mind. "No, it can't be. She wouldn't, not Sarah." "Matt, I know this is difficult to hear, but you need to consider the possibility that she's not who you thought she was. You may be facing a situation much more serious than a simple divorce," Lisa explained, her voice steady. I shook my head, trying to process the news. Why would she do something like that? And how does Michael fit into this? From what I understand, Michael was involved in some of the financial transactions. It's possible they were working together, which may have provided an incentive for the affair, she said, her tone sympathetic yet firm. You should prepare yourself for the fallout. If this goes public, it could affect your case. My mind raced, images of Sarah and Michael flooding my thoughts, their laughter echoing in my ears. I can't believe this. How could she betray me like this? I thought we were building a life together, I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could have imagined. I know this is a lot to process, but you need to stay focused. If you want to expose this, you have to be strategic, Lisa advised, her expression firm. We can use this information to your advantage in the divorce proceedings, but it will require careful planning. I nodded slowly, feeling a surge of anger rise within me. If she's been lying to me about this, then she deserves whatever comes next. I want to expose her, Lisa. I want her to face the consequences of her actions. Okay, but we need to be careful. I can help you gather evidence, but we have to tread lightly until the investigation unfolds, she replied, her demeanor professional. This could get messy. After leaving Lisa's office, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I felt the need to confront Sarah, to understand how deep this betrayal ran. I found myself driving toward her workplace, my heart pounding in my chest. What if everything I thought I knew about her was a lie? When I arrived, I parked a block away, my palms sweating as I paced outside the building. My thoughts raced as I tried to prepare myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. I spotted Sarah's car in the lot, and my pulse quickened. I walked into the lobby, my heart pounding in my ears. As I approached the reception desk, I felt a sense of determination wash over me. "I need to see Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent." "Tell her it's Matt." "She'll want to see me," I insisted. After a few tense moments, she picked up the phone and called Sarah's office. I could feel the tension in the air as I waited, each passing second amplifying my resolve. "Okay, you can go up," the receptionist said finally, her tone cautious. "She's expecting you." I made my way to Sarah's office, my heart racing with every step. I knocked lightly on the door, and when she called for me to enter, I pushed it open. "Matt!" Sarah exclaimed, looking genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" I crossed my arms, trying to hold my ground. "We need to talk. Now." Her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay," I replied, my voice cold. "I just found out about the embezzlement, Sarah." "You and Michael, what's going on?" She paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What? How do you know about that?" "It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that you've been lying to me. Was everything we had just a facade?" I pressed, the anger surging back to the surface. "Matt, please," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I didn't want you to find out like this. It's complicated. I didn't want to drag you into this mess." "Complicated? You mean you were too busy betraying me to consider the consequences of your actions? You were involved in something illegal, Sarah." I shouted, the frustration boiling over. "And with Michael, no less. Were you just using me as a cover while you played your little games?" "No," she exclaimed, shaking her head vehemently. "It wasn't like that at all. I got caught up in something that spiraled out of control. I never meant for it to get this far." "Save it," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You think you can just talk your way out of this? You don't get to manipulate me anymore." Her face crumpled, and she took a step forward, reaching for me. "Matt, please. I'm scared. If this gets out, it'll ruin me." "Good," I replied, feeling a surge of power. "You deserve every bit of it." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the tension hung heavy in the air. I could see the panic set in, and it felt like watching a carefully crafted facade crumble to dust. "I can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want this for us." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "This is what you chose, Sarah. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it." "Matt, please," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Don't do this. We can still fix this. I'll do anything you want." "Anything?" I scoffed, incredulous. "What could you possibly offer me that would change the truth? You've lost my trust completely." "I can fix this," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just give me time. I'll make it right." "I don't have time for your games anymore," I said, my heart hardening. "You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I turned on my heel and walked out, feeling a mix of triumph and despair. I had finally uncovered the truth about Sarah, but it came at a cost. As I stepped out of the building and into the sunlight, the weight of the discovery settled heavily on my shoulders. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, one filled with uncertainty, but I knew one thing for sure: I would not allow her to manipulate me any longer.